Welcome to the Animate tutorial rigging. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you a way to link your character's body parts together so that when you animate, they work together. But just to pick up where we left off last time, after we created the first patch for our arm, I continued to create the rest of the patches. So as you see now, there are no dark lines where they were previously. And anywhere where I had a patch, I now have a row of symbols. The one thing that I forgot to mention was that although we nudged the body parts along the z-axis together for the front view in the first column, often when you then change views to three-quarter profile or to the profile view, there are things that are out of place. So I went through and I also z-nudged, as you can see through these keyframes, the first column of the second or third view. So I think it was really just the second arm, so this arm on this side, that was giving me some trouble. So the first thing that we're going to do in the rigging tutorial is create a master peg, and that peg is going to house or be able to move or be able to accept transformations and keyframes for all the body parts of your cartoon rabbit. So generally, when you create a peg, if you have a layer selected and you click on the peg button or add peg button, it creates a peg directly for that layer and takes on the name of the layer but adds a -p. So I'm just going to undo that. If you have everything selected and you click on the peg button, then it individually gives a peg for every single one of your drawing layers. So we don't want that either. I'm going to undo that. What we want is for nothing to be selected in the timeline and then to create a peg. This puts the peg all the way at the bottom of your layer stack. Then if you select the last layer and then shift select the top layer and then drag it over your peg, they now are all attached to your peg. And you can see this by the way that they're indented. You can see this little black indentation line. And if I actually click on this light gray arrow here, you can collapse the entire character in its peg. So the next thing I'm going to do is rename the peg. And I'm going to rename it Karate Rabbit _ master -peg. Like that. So one way of rigging, which is not the method that we're going to use, but that'll show you anyway, is called the hierarchy. And the way that you do that is that you attach the hand to the forearm and the forearm to the upper arm. So if I select the hand in the camera view with the transform tool, you'll see it appear here in the timeline. Then what I can do is click and drag it above the forearm. And you see that it's disappeared. So if I then uncollapse the forearm, I'm just going to drag this out here, you can see that the hand is attached to it, and you can tell this because of its indentation. So just as all these layers are attached to the master peg, this hand is now attached to the forearm. Then I can do the same thing by dragging the forearm over the arm. So now the hand, the forearm are attached to the arm. So if I select this arm in the timeline, then in the camera view I can rotate the entire group. I can then either click here in the timeline again and rotate the group again, or I can just click on an individual body part and rotate it. So right now that seems pretty good, but the problem is that you can't move these pieces individually. For example, if I wanted to stretch this arm out but keep the hand exactly as is, that's impossible. The hand is getting scaled with this arm. So there's sort of a lack of flexibility when you use a hierarchy method. So let's just undo that. Which is good. So the other method that you could use is by adding a peg. So using this button to add a peg to your drawing layers. And this is actually a pretty good method, except for the one fact that pegs have an embedded pivot that cannot be animated over time. So to work around this problem, what we're going to do is use drawing layers as pegs. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to click on the Add Drawing Layer button here. And then I'm going to rename my drawing right away to Karate Rabbit 02 arm -peg. And it's very important that you use this notation of peg at the end of whatever layer name that you choose, because the symbol for this layer is that of a drawing. It doesn't have a peg symbol like this. So unless you write it, you won't remember that you're using this drawing layer as a peg. So then what I'm going to do is drag it under the master peg and then attach the arm to it. Then what I'm going to do is create another drawing layer. And I'm going to rename this one as well to Karate O2 lower arm dash peg. And to this peg, I'm going to attach the forearm and the hand. And I'm actually going to bring the hand below the forearm. Like that. So right now, if we collapse the entire thing, for our Karate Rabbit, oh, so this isn't attached. I'm going to attach the lower arm to the arm peg. So right now, if we collapse the Karate Rabbit O2 arm peg, or if we uncollapse it rather, you'll see that inside you have just the arm, so this upper part, and then you have a second peg called Karate Rabbit O2 lower arm peg. And then if we uncollapse that, you'll see you have the forearm and the hand. So the forearm and the hand. So now if you want, you can individually scale something, but at the same time, you can rotate the entire arm. Oh, this brings me to a point that I still have to set the pivot for this as well. But what I'm saying is you can in fact rotate and scale individually. So you can use this as a group, or you can use the pieces individually, so you get that maximum flexibility. But as you just witnessed, we still need to set the pivot when you do something like this, because these drawing layers haven't had their pivots set for them yet. So the pivot that we want to use for the lower arm would in fact be the pivot for the forearm. So we want the pivot for this group, the hand and the lower arm, to be at the same place that it is for the lower arm, and that's sort of in this elbow joint. And the place that we would like the pivot for the arm peg is the upper arm pivot, so at the shoulder. So to do this, I'm going to add an empty drawing, so that's this right here, to my Karate Rabbit O2 arm peg, and I'm going to extend that entire layer for now, the exposures of that layer to frame 20, and I can do this by right-clicking and choosing the menu item Extend Exposure, or by using the keyboard shortcut F5. Then what I'm going to do is actually go into the symbol for the upper arm, and then on the Karate Rabbit O2 arm layer, so not the patch layer, but this layer, I'm going to right-click and select Copy Cells from Timeline, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Command-C for Mac or Control-C for Windows. Then I'm going to exit the symbol, and I'm going to select the first cell for the Karate Rabbit O2 arm peg, right-click again, and select the menu item Paste Special. Then from the Advanced tab, I'm going to select the option Update Drawing Pivot, and click on OK or hit Enter. So as you may have noticed, the pivot that was sort of around here on the chest, between the chest and the arm, jumped to where it should be on the shoulder. Then what I'm going to do is click on the forearm layer and do the same thing. Oh, first of all, I need to create an empty drawing for my Karate Rabbit O2 lower arm peg. I'm going to do the same thing and extend the exposure to 20. Then I'm going to go to the forearm layer, do my copy, click on the lower arm peg, and then instead of selecting Paste Special, I'm going to select Paste Special again. And as you notice, the pivot now appears in the correct spot on the elbow. And what Paste Special again does is it just repeats whatever action it performed in the Paste Special prior. And so that looks pretty good. And let's try the rotation now, see if it works a bit better. So I'll rotate the entire arm, I'll rotate just from the elbow, and I'll rotate just from the hand. So that looks pretty good. So it looks like there's a few things that you need to fix. So that would be the tail. So the Z nudging, due to this reordering, usually has to be adjusted. One thing I did add, which I didn't show in this tutorial, is that I added the timeline view toolbar, which you do by going to Windows, Toolbar, Timeline View, and it brought up this toolbar. And then what I did is I added this button at the end, which is called the Center on Selection button. And I find this button very useful. And you can get this button right-clicking on it and selecting the option Customize. Right now you can see Center on Selection in the toolbar window, but where it actually was, and where you'll probably find it, is at the bottom of the Available Tools window. Or not at the bottom. Actually closer to the top here, Center on Selection. So what I did is I selected it from this side. I clicked on this arrow button here to bring it to my toolbar window, and I clicked on either Apply or OK. And it appears at the end of my toolbar. So what I can do with this is if I select a body part in the camera view, such as the tail, with the Transform tool, and then in the timeline I click on the Center on Selection button, it'll take me to that layer in the timeline, that body parts layer. And so now what I can do is I can click back in the camera view and use Alt up arrow to nudge it backwards until it goes behind the arm. So now what I'm going to do is continue to rig the cartoon rabbit, but I'm probably going to speed up this part of the video. After I'm through, I'll go over with you what I did in the timeline so that you can have a clear idea of what should be connected to what. Okay, so let's go over the way that I structured the Karate Rabbit. If I made any mistakes, you might see the difference in the sample material, so I would take the sample materials word over what you see here in the video. I'm pretty sure this is the way the structure should be, but often after I finish a video I realize, oh, maybe I should have attached this here or there, but this is basically what it should look like. So we have the master peg, and attached to the master peg are two other pegs, the upper body and the lower body. So the upper body's pivot is actually at the navel of the Karate Rabbit, and it moves obviously the upper body of the entire rabbit. And the lower body does the same. We took the pivot of the hips and it moves the entire lower body. I actually included the tail as part of the upper body just because it's so high up and it kind of sits more behind the body. Then if we go into the upper body, we'll see there's two more pegs. There's the body peg and there's the neck peg. So the body peg is divided into the body, the two arms, and the tail. And then each arm consequently is divided into the arm and the upper arm, the lower arm. And then if we look at the neck, we have the head and the neck. So the head is divided into the facial features and the actual face, the actual blank head without, or blank face without any of the facial features. And the facial features is broken into the mouth, nose, the two eyes, and every eye includes the eyelid, the pupil, and the eyeball. So those three. And the two eyebrows. And I believe that's it for the facial features. And then the entire head, as I mentioned, contains the facial features, the face, and the two ears. Then if we look at the lower body, we have the two legs and the hips. And every leg is divided into the entire leg and then the lower leg, which operates the tibia and the foot. So you're going to have the sample material, so you'll be able to examine the structure in further detail. So there are a few things that I did in the fast-forwarded part or the time-lapse part of the video that I'd like to explain. First of all, the recording software that I'm using to record these videos unfortunately uses the keyboard shortcut F5 to turn on and off one of its functions, so I didn't use it, but the fastest way really to extend the exposures for these drawing elements / pegs is really to use F5, so you should use it as much as possible and not use the right-clicking. Secondly, the only peg I have to say actually that I didn't copy and paste special a pivot for was the facial features. I actually had to there we go. So I actually had to place the pivot in the center of all the facial features using the pivot tool. So that's something you're going to have to do as well. And I just sort of tried to make it in the center of all the features, so an equal distance from the two eyebrows and the bottom of the mouth. The next thing I wanted to mention is to be careful when you exit a symbol. The software automatically jumps you back up to the top where the master peg is, so you may have been working farther down below, and then as soon as you enter your symbol then exit, you'll find you're back up here, and then you might get confused. So you really have to be careful with that. Use this feature a lot, the center on selection button, to just simply select again what you were working on and find it in the timeline, and that way you won't get mixed up. The next thing I realized is that even though we copy and pasted the pivots from various body parts up to their peg, the most appropriate one, of course, I realized that once we change views, we also have to repaste the new pivot. So let me try to find a good example. I actually think the arm might be a good example. So yeah, here already I'm going to have to Z nudge it to bring it back to where it should be. Actually, let me use the second one here to begin with, but also what I should really do is the pivot is fine here, and then as soon as I get to frame 9, the pivot actually changes. It's no longer there, it should be here. So what I can do is click on this button here, duplicate drawings, and what it does is it actually, I don't know if you notice, cuts sort of a line in this row of exposures. So now these drawings, or these exposures which are linked to the same drawing, and these exposures which are linked to the same drawing are different, which means that I can place the pivot differently. Whereas before, if I move the pivot here, it would also move over here or any of the drawings in this row. So now what I can do is go down to the arm, enter the symbol. From the 3/4 view, I can copy again. I can exit the symbol. So I'm going to go back up to this peg right here. And now what I want to do is do my paste special again. Or this time I'm just going to paste special and not paste special again, just to be sure. Yeah, there we go. So you have to make sure you select Update Drawing Pivot. And then as you see, the pivot went to the proper place. So you're going to have to go through and do that for all of these drawing layers / pegs, as well as go through and Z-nudge anything that's been displaced once more. Lastly, I realized that it might be a bit confusing that I named this peg here body. I think what I really meant to name it, so I'm going to rename it right now, is torso. Because there's an upper body and a lower body, I don't think it's super clear what's going on here, so let's try that. So in the upper body peg, we have the torso, which links the body and the arms, which I think might just distinguish the difference and make it a little bit clearer. So I believe that's it for the tutorial rigging. Stay tuned for the next tutorial using effects to fix the character's mouth.